This week on the Four Rivers Ag Report, what does April showers mean to May planting?
And we have interviews and more stories on the muck that you're trying to farm.
And I have the best looking corn in the state.
That and more coming up on the Four Rivers Ag Report.
Welcome to the Four Rivers Ag Report. I'm Fred Peralta.
And I'm Monica Becker. The weather the last couple of days has been nice, sunny, warmer, and a bit windy. Perfect weather to help dry out those fields. But this week we have seen a ton of coverage about the delays in planting that the 7+ inches of rain have caused.
Yep.
It's ranged from the sky is falling to
Well, and somewhere between those 2 points most likely lies the answer. First up, we have Pete Taylor, a lifelong farmer from Esmond, Illinois and DeKalb County on the phone. And he happens to be the president of the Illinois Corn Growers Association. First of all, Paul, how was the spring up north?
Well, we've had a cool, wet spring. The rain-wise, we're not actually too far above normal. We are above normal for moisture, but we had some rain early. We still had some frost in the ground. We got a lot of runoff. We had a lot of flood situations. And quite honestly, until we get rid of some of this excess water, whether it's in road ditches or saturated soils, we're just going to have a slow start.
This isn't your first rodeo, so late planting isn't all that uncommon, is it?
Well, that's an interesting way to put it. The short answer is we have been involved in late planting. Statistically, the state, Midwest, have been involved in late planting before. When these conversations started a month ago, we could say, well, we weren't early anymore, but we weren't late. Well, now we're certainly not early, and we're getting closer to being late. So the real question is what's the penalty for being late? And I think that's the one most folks are really concerned about.
Speaking of that penalty, does a wet spring help or hurt yield? Or is it really a function of how much time the crop has to mature?
Well, I think the reality is that weather throughout the growing season will trump any significant impacts that weather has now, and I don't mean that lightly. We all know that it's an incentive to get our crops planted early, take advantage of the season, make better weather for pollination, etc. However, 2012 was a perfect illustration that crops went in good shape. We got enough moisture to get them up, get them going. By the end of May, we were all concerned about a bin buster. The fall of 2012, corn under $4, and then it quit raining.
Yes.
And so no matter how good the start was, summer weather wins. Now, with the wet weather, unlike last spring, we can screw this up. We can be out there working this when it's too wet. We can get sidewall smearing. Those kind of things just aren't generally associated with wetter soil conditions and people that are in a hurry and would say, well, it's only 1 or 2 acres out of the field, so it's not that big a deal. If that was true, that's right. But I have been fortunate to have had for a hobby general aviation. I've got a small airplane, and I just can't tell you how many times you fly around in late July and August and look at fields, particularly cornfields, and see the compaction tracks that were left from the fields being worked when they weren't fit in the spring, knowing that there's yield damage. Most of that can't be seen from the road.
So is that the reason for the expression you don't want to plant too early, too wet, or too often?
Well, I've heard some conversations. Emerson Nassinger from the University of Illinois has been really encouraging folks to hold on, slow down, get this right because you only got one chance this year. Most of us have roughly 40 cropping seasons to plant. And I know some of the families maybe that are up in the 10, 15 plus thousands of acres are very, very nervous. And we can talk about that a little bit because I think there's 2 issues going on here. One is what's happening on our individual farms with that potential yield, and what's happening in the big picture with what this crop size could potentially be in 2013.
Okay, Daryl Good says it could still be very, very large.
Exactly. And so we have that potential. It's ours to lose. If it's an individual farmer, my understanding is that we at Illinois Corn have worked hard, farm bill stuff, but particularly crop insurance. Our members tell us that's important. We think the sign up for crop insurance is higher in 13 to 14. Crop insurance really helped a lot of farmers last year without ad hoc disaster. And so there is exposure. I get it. There's always exposure with insurance coverage, or usually there is. The big issue to me is what's going to happen with the aggregate crop. We destroyed a lot of demand last year, particularly in the export market. We're in a very precarious situation with the renewable fuel and where we go with cornstarch ethanol in the future, expanding into advanced biofuels, etc. And a short crop this year, 2013, nationally in this country, would be way bigger problem than the individual yield loss that individual farmers are likely to potentially suffer.
So it's really important to keep the harvest figures high, right?
Absolutely. We were cheering for a big crop. I say that tongue in cheek, but we really were last year. Nobody wants low prices, but we really need big crop. We're getting a lot of pushback in Congress. We're getting a lot of pushback on crop insurance. And if we have 2 or 3 years of precarious crop situations where there's big indemnity payouts, there's going to be some really close scrutiny, not only on crop insurance, but how we're going to do any sort of disaster program. And we're going to lose a lot of our customers, and that is a problem.
Once you lose a customer, it's tough to get them back, right?
Yes, and we've been through we've been through farm production cycles before, whether they're drought or wet. We've been through low prices, high prices, and we know that this is going to change. One of these years, we're just going to have a bin buster of a crop. And after 2 or 3 short years here, we may have 5 years of bin busters of crops.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to have every market in place that we can to help the rural economy and particularly corn producers.
So one last thing now, any advice you give to those nervous Nellies out there sitting on their tractors waiting?
Well, this is the hard one. I have to empathize with you. This is right around the 1st of May here in 2013. I know there's a lot of our neighbors that are really eager, but I just don't sense this sense of concern that we have to get going here at all costs. Northern Illinois, we've got a little different weather environment. I understand that. We typically don't finish up our fall work till the week of Thanksgiving, so we're used to working all year. We don't have to finish in September. But on a more realistic note, I just got a piece yesterday from Ohio State University. Looked at a number of years where the 40 or 50% threshold of planting was not accomplished until way late in May. And it's amazing. In a couple instances, I'm looking here, 1983 and 2002, the aggregate yield loss for the state was low. But in some years, it's actually higher. If you look at 2009, those fellows sat and sat and sat. And by May 20th, they only had 42% of their corn planted in the state of Ohio. And they ended up being 15% above their 5-year average. Now, that's tough for somebody that's sitting there. You got some high-priced rent ground. You've got a lot of money invested, and you're waiting to go. But the point is, it ain't over till the large lady sings, and we're a long ways from that right now. So it's more important to do this right than to get it done early and then to pay all summer long.
So, okay, Paul Taylor, the president of the Illinois Corn Growers Association, and an opera aficionado.
Well, you never know what roles you have to play, and I have one of those tin hats with the horns. So there's some that are just tough crowds to deal with.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and Paul, I can tell you we'll be talking to you again.
Paul Taylor mentioned Emerson Nafziger, so we asked Todd Gleason to find out what the U of I Extension agronomist thinks of the pace or lack thereof of planting, or whether or not we should panic.
We certainly haven't guaranteed ourselves a poor crop, nor have we shown that we're going to get a good crop. But if we get good rainfall during the season, I think we will get a good crop yet this year. Will it be a record breaker? If you look back at our highest yields we've ever had, it's a real mixed how they start the season. So It's what happens again during the middle of the season that makes the most difference. If you look at the research that we've done, we have tried to make estimates of the effect of delayed planting on yields, and it accelerates as we move through May. Today, we're down at only a few tenths of a percent per day of delay. So by the time we get the first third of May, I think we calculated at about 0.5% per day. The second third, about 0.7 of a percent, and then the third about 0.9 of a percent. And if you look at the cumulative effect of that, it looks scarier then, that we're looking at maybe 15% cumulative loss if we get to the 20th of May, and about 25% cumulative loss if we get to the end of May. Well, nobody expects us to, plant into June, although it certainly has happened before. I guess the way I would put it, the longer we go, the more unlikely it is that the season will be so favorable that it'll get us to high yields, or as high a yields as we would have had if we could have started on time. Now, on the other side of it, April was not a very kind month, and the little bit of crop that we did get planted there in the first week of April, just managing to struggle up now, and where it's been really wet and with water standing on the field, some of that may not make it at all. So it's not like getting it planted all a month ago would have given us some great advantage here, and we do know from experience that early May can be a good time to plant. So we hope that it breaks free and lets us get started.
There have been wet springs before and late plantings before too. So we asked Chris Langen and Cameron Craig to look behind the numbers to see what a season like this meant in the past on this week's On the Map.
I'm with Chris Langen from the Department of Geology Geography, and we're here again for On the Map. And so with all this rainfall we've seen over the last couple of weeks, farmers are not getting into the fields.
No, they're not. And this is kind of more up your alley, this rainfall totals we've had here for the last 2 weeks. Some areas in northern, central, and southern Illinois have gotten upwards of 8, 9, 10 inches of rain. So it's been tough.
And we're going to see more rain coming up in this coming week.
Yeah, see a lot more. So not a lot more, but another chance. So we're going to.
So what does this mean for current situation comparing to the historical?
Well, historically, where we're at right now isn't that much different from years in the past. I've highlighted here in yellow some of the years where we've had less than 5% of the corn planted by this last week in April. Historically, and as you can see, even back in 2009 we only had 4%, back in 93 1%, and then we had a stretch in the early 80s where consecutive years we only had between 1 and 5% planted at this time.
Okay, and so it's really not that big of a deal.
I think it's really too early yet, because if you look at how those years turned out in terms of production, the 80s, there was one year, 83 in particular, where yields were way down or production levels were way down. But the other years in that time frame really were fairly average. 93 was a little bit below what 92 was, but then if we go up to as recently as 2009, when we had only 4%, I believe, at this time planted, nationally that was a record year for corn production, still is today, and Illinois dropped a little bit from the year before, but not very much, so I think it's still pretty early.
It's a mindset. The farmers are just anxious to get out into the field.
Yeah, they're anxious, they want to know, what they're going to get planted, and that'll give them a little bit of an idea of what production values might be at the end of the year.
All right, and so we see the rain totals for the next 24 hours, and of course midweek, and so it looks like the Great Plains are getting better drought-wise.
A little bit better drought-wise, but again, something that's putting a lot of other people, not just farmers in Illinois, in the same boat. Up, Nebraska, up through Iowa and Minnesota, those places are going to get 4 to 6 inches of snow here over the next couple days.
Right, and so
that's going to push them back even further.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And if we look at what's planted right now, again, Illinois farmers are not alone. A lot of other states in our region in the upper Midwest have 1%, in some cases 0% of their corn in, where historically they've maybe been up in the teens, 20s, and 30%. Okay. So it's not, I think it's really still too early to tell. Historically, the results of these late plantings have been fairly variable. Right. And I keep telling myself, all we got to do is look back at last year.
Right.
We had 75% of our corn in the ground right now last year, and look what happened.
Right. The drought, and it killed it all.
So yeah, exactly. So the weather over the next few months is really what we have to be concerned about, not just what's happened so far.
All right. Well, Chris, thank you so much.
No, thank you.
It's probably not unexpected, especially after what Chris and Cameron had to say, but the wet spring has delayed planting all over the country. AgWeb produced this map that highlights the fact that only Texas and North Carolina are making decent progress on getting the seed into the ground. The Corn Belt, not so much. But some areas are beginning to see some planting. In central Nebraska, extensive cold and wet weather delayed planting. According to the USDA, corn planting usually starts in Nebraska around April 10th.
We're a good week behind, at least a week from when we wanted to start. And the only reason we waited was for soil temp to warm up a little.
Even with enough rain to delay planting, central and western Nebraska remain in extreme drought. The moisture in the ground will be enough to get the crop to emerge, but look for those western Corn Belt crops to be extensively irrigated.
So rather than calling up the crop guys this week to hear how they're dealing with the new lakefront property that they've acquired, Newswatch reporter Bryce Ricketts drove down to Toledo and Cumberland County to see how our very own Leroy Scott was getting by.
This will be Leroy Scott's 50th spring season putting seeds into the earth, and he says, at least for now, this wet planting season is nothing to be worried about.
The thing about when you have wet weather and providing you get it planted, which you usually do, why, you'll grow something. Where if you get a drought, you just don't grow anything.
Scott says he can always deal with it being too wet, but he can't work with a dry earth.
We've had wet years before, and we'll have wet years in the future, and you don't get started as early, and it'll be fine.
Scott and his partner Dustin Shoemaker say farmers are itching to get into the field, and when they can't this time of year, it can cause some anxiety.
We have been spoiled the last few years. We've been planting early, and that's unusual.
I mean, you can't do anything about it. You just take it with a grain of salt and move on.
Shoemaker says there's no way to plan for a muddy field. Heavy equipment has to stay parked because it will simply sink in the loose soil.
Like on a grain cart, you use big tires, but I mean, other than that, there's nothing you can really prepare to do other than just wait.
And according to these two farmers, have a lot of patience.
We're still in good shape. We get planted. University of Illinois says if we're planted by the 10th of May, we'll be okay.
The best way is to go out there and try it. If it's the old thing is if you can take dirt and squeeze it together if it makes mud balls too wet.
So where do we stand? Corn planting in Illinois is 1% complete versus a 36% average. Indiana is at 1% and Iowa is up to 2%. All three states have seen no real progress for the last 3 weeks. Even when I'm out here with Fred, he still has me reading numbers.
Sorry about that. Yeah, you don't get as tongue-tied as I do.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, just for that, I'll report these. The soil moisture numbers are right where you expect them. Statewide topsoil is reported 45% adequate and 55% surplus. In the East-Southeast district, we're at 14% adequate and 86% surplus. Subsoil is just about as bad. Statewide comes in at 3% short, 72% adequate, and 25% surplus. For us, it's a coin flip, 50% adequate and 50% surplus. Now back with us is Cameron wearing his weatherman's hat. And Cameron, with all the stuff that's going on, what does the next 7 to 10 days look like?
Well, 6 to 10 days. Temperature-wise, we're going to be below normal, slightly below normal. Mm-hmm. So we're going to see temperatures in the low 60s, mid 60s. Precipitation, we're doing pretty good. We're going to be near the normal, which is about, for the 6 to 10 days, the normal is considered to be about 3/4 of an inch. So we're not going to go beyond that, but that's what is expected.
Well, looking at the forecast, it's like, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
Rain.
Yes. So we're going to get a little bit on Friday, or some on Friday, and then it's just going to be drizzle?
Right. It's going to be scattered lingering showers. And the reason behind this is because it's a slow-moving front. there is a cold front attached by multiple lows.
Oh, where did we hear that before?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
It's a pattern that I noticed last year and into this year and explained to my students. And essentially, you got multiple lows stretched from the Great Lakes into Missouri and then into Texas, and then they're attached by cold fronts and warm fronts, and they tug each other.
Okay.
And so we don't get things moving. And
Okay.
So
it's a slow-moving front, not quite as loaded as the last one.
that's right. And so we're only going to expect about 1 to 1.5 inches for this whole rain period. Now, another culprit to this is the high pressure that sits out over the Atlantic, pumping more moisture into the fronts.
So now, if I remember the extended forecast, like the month ahead forecast, you mentioned we're expecting we're expecting warmer?
We're expecting warmer temperatures, okay, and then what we are going to see equal chances of precipitation. Let me backtrack. Slightly below temperatures for the next month, for the month of May, slightly below normal temperatures, and then for precipitation, still near normal.
Okay, so we hopefully will have
The rain gone.
Rain coming and going only
Right.
slightly.
Yes.
How long do you think it's going to take for what's in the ground to...
Well, this week we had great sunny skies and warm temperatures.
Right.
So you have sunny skies that help bake the soil, and with the warmer temperatures, that also increases evaporation rates. If we can get a little bit more wind, then that will help evaporate that moisture as well.
Well, hopefully what you say will come true, and that's why you get paid the big bucks for being a weather guy.
That's exactly right.
All right. Well, Cameron, thank you so much.
Thank you.
There are other things going on other than sitting around watching water evaporate. And here to tell us some events is Jessica Killo with Inside Extension.
Hi, I'm Jessica Killo with your Inside Extension. Thank you to all those who participated in National Volunteer Week last week. We appreciate all the hard work our volunteers do to make our Extension unit wonderful. It was amazing to see all the responses from those acknowledging and thanking our volunteers, and it was great to see all the personal stories that were shared. Thank you again to all our Extension volunteers. It's not too late to sign up for our 4 Seasons Gardening Telenet series. The Gardening Telenet series is your chance to learn from leading lawn and garden experts. There is no charge and it is open to the public. Event dates are May 7th, all about tomatoes, strategies for controlling common pests and disorders, and May 21st, don't doubt the drought. The Telenets will be conducted in Charleston, Arthur, and Shelbyville. To learn more and to register, go to our website. Give your brain a workout. Sign up for brain training to be held on June 17th and 24th from 1:30 until 3 o'clock p.m. at the Shelbyville Senior Center. Extension educator Sherry Burcham will be teaching this class as part of the Lakeland Community Programs. Register now at lakelandcollege.edu. All ages are welcome. And don't forget, we are now on Twitter. Follow us at UIEXT19 to receive updates on agriculture, master gardeners, family life, 4-H and youth, and much more. As always, like us on Facebook and visit our website to stay up to date on our programming. From U of I Extension serving Coles, Cumberland, Moultrie, Douglas, and Shelby counties, this has been Jessica Killo with your Inside Extension.
For those of you who might have missed it, I've decided to try growing some field corn myself and see how my plot does against the state and local averages. So the Four Rivers AgriPort test plot was created. Steve Malhorn, the manager of the Tut Greenhouse in Eastern Illinois University, planted 3 rows of seeds in a raised bed outside the greenhouse. We're not going to do anything but watch the corn grow, although Steve might do some weeding because he's like that. We did double plant seeds at each spot because we wanted to make sure we had some germination. Steve will be thinning out the corn soon, but we not only had some germination, but it looks like over 90% of the seeds have sprouted. So I was talking to a farmer in Champaign County this weekend, and I showed him pictures of the Four Rivers AgriPort test plot. He too is waiting and watching the pond shrink on his land. And after looking at my photos, he smiled and said, "Fred, for the first and possibly only time in your life, you can say you have the best looking corn in the state." I have the best looking corn in the state.
So you're trying to tell me that you're trying to grow corn in Illinois?
Did I tell you I have the best looking corn in the state?
Well, that's it for this week. Good luck with planting.
Work hard, be safe, enjoy the beautiful sunsets. And I'm Fred Peralta.
And I'm Monica Becker. Thanks for watching the Four Rivers AgriPort.